excellent speakers tomorrow who are going to address this issue.
I mean, as compared to the normal geriatric age group,
Yes,
if you compare it with the Down syndrome age group.
yes. So I think that is the age group we are talking about. The relevance of dementia and Alzheimer's is something that has been described by the age of 40 years. We don't actually call it Alzheimer's or dementia in the younger age group. We just look for other causes if you are having regression of your milestones.
Thank you. We'll have to wrap up the session. You can ask Dr. Bhavani directly after the session is over. Thank you, Dr. Bhavani. We'll go on to the next session. I'd invite Dr. Krati Shah, chairing the next session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to announce the chair for the next session. That's Dr. Ellen Skledzian. She's CEO for Down Syndrome Australia. She has a PhD in cognitive psychology and has an extensive experience in advocacy and policy change. So she's our chair for the next session, and I hope you all enjoy, and all the best to all the speakers. Can we give her a good hand, please? Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. Hopefully you're still feeling awake after such a lovely lunch and getting to the time in the afternoon where I'm sure we're all feeling like we need a bit of a stretch. I'm really honoured to be able to take part in this conference and to be visiting with you from Australia. The next session that we have quite a few speakers, and I note that we're already running just a little bit behind time. The different streams of information that we'll be hearing about include health issues again. We'll be hearing a bit more about the endocrine issues. We'll also hear about education and inclusive education and physical activity, so sport and dance. So I think it'll be a really good session, and we'll try to keep to time so that you can have your tea and also finish up today in a timely way. Our first speaker is Dr. Jayashree Gopal. She's a senior consultant in diabetes and endocrinology at Apollo Hospitals in Chennai.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and a special hello to the parents that some of the parents I met, some of the parents I did not meet. Over the last sort of 6 years or so, I've been working with with the organization that Rekha Madam started, and it's been a pleasure, and again, it's an honor to be here. So a lot of my talk is going to be covering, I think, some of the same topics that Dr. Bhavani touched upon. I'm sorry about that. But I'm really addressing a lot of the common concerns that parents have regarding the thyroid. So I hope you go away with a little bit more or a little bit of a different information after my talk. I'll skip this slide. A little bit of fun information about the thyroid gland in case you were wondering. So the thyroid gland actually developed as a way to optimize iodine absorption from the environment. If you think about it, iodine is present a lot in seawater. But when we made the transition, when life evolved from water into the land, we had to develop a gland which optimized the use of iodine. So that's why the thyroid gland developed to help in maximizing iodine absorption. The main purpose of the thyroid hormone is to regulate our body temperature. And interestingly, in frogs, it's actually needed for metamorphosis. Frogs or tadpoles which do not have a working thyroid gland, they don't lose their tail. interestingly. So thyroid is important for various sort of functions in different animals, but thyroid is present. It's one of the earliest hormones that developed along the way, and it developed different functions in different environments. So this is a slide that was mentioned earlier, shown earlier, a little bit about it. Basically, the hypothalamus makes this hormone called TRH. Don't worry too much about the names, but this hormone then works on something called the pituitary gland. So all of this is within our brain, and the pituitary gland releases this hormone called TSH. You'll be hearing again and again about TSH because you look at your children's reports, you'll see this TSH. The TSH is the one that goes and works on the thyroid gland and makes it secrete or make thyroid T4 and T3, which then gets into the blood, which is the active hormone. So the T3 is the actual active hormone, and in the periphery, all of the T4, which is made by the gland and put out into the blood, the T4 gets converted into T3, and the T3 is the one that actually goes into the cell and has its effects. The thyroid hormone has an effect on every single cell of our body. So I always like to say, starting from, say, your hair, your skin, every single part, your lungs, your heart, your stomach, your intestine, down to your nails. Every single cell in your body requires the thyroid hormone to work normally. So you can imagine that if the thyroid levels are not okay in the blood, that there may be dysfunction affecting every single organ system in our body. Again, this was mentioned by Dr. Bhavani, so I'm going to skip this. Now, this is common terms that we use, medical terms. I thought I'll talk a little bit about this. Hypo always means under, less. So hypothyroid means the gland is not making as much thyroid hormone as your body needs. Hyper means the gland is making too much. The most common problem that children with Down syndrome face is hypothyroidism. Though we have seen children with hyperthyroidism, we have seen children with swelling of the neck or a goiter, but the most common problem that they face is this underactive thyroid gland. And the way it is diagnosed, again, as Dr. Bhavani mentioned, is by the fact of picking up a high TSH. The T4 and T3 can be normal or low. It doesn't matter. The TSH will be high, which means the thyroid gland is not working properly. In general, the TSH is the most important hormone. I don't want this to be a medical lecture, but I just want to say that please take care. There are certain special situations where the TSH may not be a proper reflection of the gland activity. Always talk to your physician, talk to your endocrinologist. So the TSH is the primary hormone that we use, but we have to interpret it with care, looking at the T4, T3, and most important, looking at the clinical picture. The symptoms of hypo and hyperthyroidism, everybody knows about thyroid and weight. It is assumed that when you're hypothyroid, when the gland becomes underactive, you gain weight. That is certainly a common symptom, but the weight gain because of an underactive thyroid is not extreme. It's not that you're going to gain about 15 to 20 kilos because your thyroid gland is underactive. At the most, you may gain about 3 to 5 kilos when your thyroid gland is working less, and most of that weight gain is the water retention that occurs when the gland is not working properly. Constant fatigue and tiredness, it's a very, very, very common complaint in all people with a thyroid dysfunction, whether the gland is underactive or overactive. So tiredness is a very classical feature of thyroid dysfunction. Muscle pain, aches and pains, so again very common. People come in and say, my joints are hurting, my calves are hurting. This is again a very common feature of a hypothyroidism. Hair fall, again a very common feature of hypothyroidism, and skin dryness, itching, increased incidence of allergies. In fact, we noticed that a lot of children have increased. Someone asked a question about antibodies, autoimmune conditions. People with thyroid problems have been noted to have increased tendency towards developing upper respiratory infections, frequent cough and cold, and quite often when we put them on thyroid tablets, this frequency of upper respiratory infections tends to come down. So their allergic tendencies, whether it be the skin allergy or allergic rhinitis, what we say common cold, all of this tends to increase if they have hypothyroidism. So why is thyroid testing so important in Down syndrome? Obviously, because thyroid levels are very important for normal growth. So if the gland becomes underactive, normal growth will be affected and it can halt. And most important, replacement of the thyroid hormone with the tablets will restore the thyroid status and restore the growth back to the child's normal levels. And this is just a growth chart to show what happens if your thyroid is not working. You can see that the height gain that occurs tails off. It stops. It should be going along this red line. It doesn't do that. It tails off, and after you institute thyroxine treatment, there is catch-up growth, and then the child starts growing normally. So it's very, very essential, again, as has been mentioned earlier, that thyroid be tested regularly and that the any thyroid dysfunction be picked up and treated at an early stage. These are some of the other symptoms. This is all pictures from very early days when the thyroid, this is not necessarily only in Down syndrome, but in the early days before thyroid was being thought of as a common concern, this is how people would present with sort of a puffy face because of the water retention. They'd look very dull, lethargic, and then after treatment you can see that all of these changes reverse. The thyroid, like I said, has an effect on every single cell in the body. So not only growth disturbances, not only sort of this water retention, but you have, if you go from head to foot, every single organ. You can talk about hair fall, dry and flaky skin, the tongue becomes enlarged and people have difficulty talking. You may have a swelling of the neck, you may have a slowed heartbeat, you may have constipation, again a very, very common complaint. Now this is a common complaint both in Down syndrome and in thyroid disorders, but constipation is a very common complaint in both these conditions. In Down syndrome, there are a few studies done looking at what is the prevalence of hypothyroidism. This is one of the most recent studies that I could find. This was done in Italy, and they took children from birth and they followed them up to 10 years, and they found that at birth, 7% of children had incidence of what Dr. Bhavani was speaking about, congenital hypothyroidism. Children were born with an underactive thyroid gland, and that is slightly, it's actually much higher than what we would find in children without Down syndrome. In that population, the incidence is roughly in the order of about 0.1%. So, screening for thyroid dysfunction at birth is extremely important in these children. And if you follow them up by the age of 10 years in this particular study, by the age of 10 years, 30% of children had evidence of thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism. So 3 out of every 10 children had evidence of a thyroid dysfunction. Again, it drives home the point that we need to monitor the thyroid levels regularly. What I have been doing, again, there are no specific guidelines for this, but I do check it at birth. Dr. Priya mentioned checking it again at about 3 months. I certainly do it at least 2 to 3 times in the first year of life, every 6 months thereafter till the first 4 years of life, and then annually. The reason I do that a little bit more frequently in the first 4 years of life is because children are growing very fast at this age, and they are not able to explain their symptoms. They are not going to be able to come and tell you my hands are hurting and things like that. And I think it's very important that we keep an eye on the kids. So every 6 months is what I generally recommend to parents in the first 4 years of life, and thereafter annually, and to look out for any symptoms of a thyroid problem. So if you think your child is becoming less active, this is the most important thing that parents can look out for. And a lot of times, sometimes I've had parents come and tell me my child is less active, tested the thyroid and found that there was a bit of a thyroid problem. Constipation, more than usual. Like I said, constipation is anyway a common problem. More than the usual problem, if it occurs, think of the thyroid. Other common symptoms are, of course, hair fall and skin dryness. So these things you can look out for, and if you notice any change in the behavior of a child who's been very active, running around, going and sitting in a corner, refusing to move about, think of the thyroid and check for it. Thyroid antibodies, I thought I'll spend a minute talking about this because more and more parents are beginning to test this and they get very alarmed with the results. Thyroid antibodies are nothing but proteins that our body is making, which is working against the thyroid gland, and there are 2 main types. You can see, don't worry about the names. But just focus on the last point. The high levels of antibodies only mean that the thyroid gland may not function properly. It has no other significance. I'm going to reiterate that. High levels of thyroid antibodies only mean that the thyroid gland may not function properly. In other words, no matter what the level of antibodies, there may be people in the audience who've had their antibodies checked. It doesn't matter if your antibody level is some 225 or 500 or 1000. It doesn't matter at all. As long as your TSH value is normal, the level of the thyroid antibody is not of concern. The only thing it is going to tell the physician is you are more likely to develop a thyroid problem. So check the thyroid levels regularly, even more regularly if necessary, maybe every 6 months, if not yearly once, something like that. So that is the only significance of thyroid antibodies. There is no need to be alarmed about the actual numbers, because quite often we find numbers of 1000, 1200. By itself, the level of those antibodies is it doesn't affect the child in any way, as long as the TSH level is in the normal range. Again, this is a very common concern among parents. What if my doctor says that the thyroid levels are normal, but the child is exhibiting all the symptoms that I mentioned, things like the constipation, the slow growth? What does that mean? Does it mean that the thyroid is responsible even though the level is normal and the doctor has said it is normal? This is very common because a lot of the symptoms overlap. Again, Dr. Bhavani mentioned this, the symptoms of hypothyroidism and a lot of the symptoms that we see in children with Down syndrome are common. So it is, we generally go by the blood test to diagnose a thyroid problem. What if the thyroid levels are borderline? So this was what was alluded to as subclinical hypothyroidism, or what we call a mildly underactive thyroid. So it is a very controversial topic for among doctors all over the world, whether we should treat or not this sort of subclinical. Subclinical meaning the gland is working maybe not at 100% of normal, it may be working, say, at 99% of normal. Is there any point in treating a slight underactivity of the gland is the question. One thing we need to keep in mind is that the TSH values change with age. The TSH values are the highest at birth. So if you've had a blood test which is done soon after birth, it will be very high. I just have a couple of more slides, I'll finish up. So sorry, I run out of time. And then it tends to go down. So it's very important that you look at the age when you interpret the TSH value. So what do I do if I have a borderline TSH? I was just talking to one of the parents now. If you have a TSH value of 6 or 7, which is considered normal for the age, but let's say the thyroid antibodies are very positive, or the doctor feels that the thyroid, the child is developing a goiter or swelling of the thyroid gland, I think it is important that that level of thyroid dysfunction be treated. So consider treatment even for so-called subclinical or slightly underactive thyroid gland, considering other factors, and monitor the levels regularly. One of the reasons to do this is because replacement with thyroid hormone is not it's not detrimental by itself. There is no harm in giving thyroid tablet, provided you do the blood test regularly and you keep the levels within the normal range. This one? Borderline TSH, what to do? This one? Yeah, sure. So you can see these are the normal levels, and you can see how it drops with age. So thyroid hormone replacement, again, one more question raised by parents was, do I have to keep giving it for life? So far, there has been no other way found to make the gland come back to working normally. In general, if the thyroid gland becomes underactive, you do have to replace with thyroid tablet, and that tablet has to be taken for life usually. As long as you're checking the thyroid levels every 6 months or so, making sure you're taking the right dosage of the tablet per se does not usually have any adverse effects. Can I prevent a thyroid problem? To some extent, yes. Two things. One is avoid excess weight gain. When you gain weight, your TSH value goes up. You don't gain weight because of the thyroid problem, but because you gain weight because of an unhealthy lifestyle, poor food habits, not enough exercise, your TSH value can go up. So if you're exercising regularly, keeping your weight, which is near normal for your age, your thyroid function will also be normal. And maintain a good nutrition. All the things that are important overall for the health of our body, iron, iodine, selenium, all of these things are also important for the thyroid gland. We don't recommend any specific nutrition for the thyroid gland, but it is important that good nutrition be maintained to ensure that the thyroid works normally. But to some extent, we cannot prevent it because hereditary and genetic problems do cause the thyroid. We cannot do anything about that. But at least if you maintain good nutrition and avoid excess weight gain, you can reduce the risk. Other endocrine issues, again, Dr. Bhavani has spoken about this. I'm not going to talk about growth. One thing about puberty, it is generally normal. Only the growth spurt does not occur that we would otherwise see, but it occurs in the normal age. So pubertal changes start occurring anywhere from 10 to 14 years. So if it is occurring earlier than, say, 9 years, pubertal changes are occurring earlier than 8 or 9 years, or if it has not occurred after 14 to 15 years, you do have to talk to your doctor. So pubertal changes occur at the normal age in children with Downs, and periods in general are regular. There is, if it is not regular, then there is some other hormonal imbalance which has to be looked at. And they do have normal fertility potential. So it becomes important then to start discussing these health issues in adolescents particularly. Things like sexual health and contraception and fertility and so on and so forth needs to be also addressed. So to summarize, I think it's important that we ensure that all children reach their full potential and mainly not suffer due to treatable medical conditions like the thyroid. And regular screening tests, as has been alluded to earlier, ensure that all children do reach their full potential. I'll stop here. I'm sorry for rushing through. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that very clear explanation of the thyroid issues and symptoms to look out for and the other information. I think we have time for just a couple quick questions, if anyone has questions.
Yes.
pediatrician has actually stopped the complete therapy. So is this the right way of going?
At what age?
At 1.5 years actually.
So generally, um, in general, what is advised is if the initial values were very borderline, let's say you had a TSH value and we've done other tests, you've done an ultrasound which shows that the gland is present, at the age of 4 years, you can think about giving a trial of without the tablet to see if the levels remain normal without tablet. What has been shown is that a certain number of children, somewhere around 30% of children who are diagnosed with hypothyroidism at birth, turn out to have a normally functioning thyroid. But this sort of change is generally recommended that it be done at the age of 4 years. After the age of 4 years, thyroid deficiency does not irreversibly affect brain development. Before the age of 4 years, thyroid is very important for normal brain development. So generally, I would have suggested something like this after the age of 4 years, unless there was some other thing. I mean, I do not know the particulars, but...
So ma'am, we should still continue with the therapy because doctor have stopped it now.
If the doctor has stopped it, check the blood levels regularly. Repeat it after 1 month. Okay. Repeat it again after another 2 months, then every 3 months thereafter regularly. If the levels are remaining normal, TSH well within the normal range, 1, 2, with normal levels of T4, T3, no need to treat.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is there another question? Yeah.
Might have a chance of having hypo or hyperthyroidism at a later stage?
Yes, yes, that is the reason for monitoring the thyroid levels regularly. In general, it's recommended it be done every 1 or 2 years, depending on different countries have their own protocol. After the age of 4 years, every year up to the age of 18, even as adults, the screening has to be continued.
Is there any last question?
Yeah.
Just up there? This will have to be the last one, just for purposes of time.
Good afternoon. My daughter, she's 5.5, and at birth she did not have thyroid. She had a congenital heart problem. We got her operated, and during that time they put her on, just after the operation, they put her on thyroxine, and they've given her 12.5 mg dose. And ever since then, they have kept it on, and they've said, she does not have thyroid. The thyroid levels are in control, everything is in check. But still, we are giving her 12.5 mg as the endocrinologist has suggested. So should we continue this, or can we stop it or try to?
So it's difficult to know. I mean, I would, in a situation like this, I would consider doing thyroid antibodies.
Yeah, he had done the antibodies, and he said that there are the antibodies, and she might get that thyroid in the future, so just continue it.
So I think if the antibodies are positive, I think it's reasonable to continue, and 12.5 is not going to hurt, and it may help.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
we
much.
have a small gift for you, but I haven't.
That's okay.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Paul Zanin, and he is a freelance writer from the UK, and you'll have heard him speak this morning already. He's going to be speaking with us about the Sports Academy for Down syndrome. So, come.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? It's very bright up here. Hopefully you're all still awake. I'm still digesting my food as well, so I'm a little bit on the sleepy side. So the crux of what I'm going to be speaking about today is actually the influence of sport on people with Down syndrome. So we've had a great launching platform from Dr. Bhavani, where she was talking about the longevity of people with Down syndrome, sort of going from the age of something like 12, 18, 20, up about a century ago, not even that, which is mad. And if you take it back even further, then here's an interesting fact. So Dr. John Langland Down and his wife, they bought a huge plot of land in a place called Tennington in southwest London. Part of that plot still exists, and the head office of the Down Syndrome Association in the UK have that building with a lovely theatre on site. Now, at the time, John Langland Down, he had a vision that people who were going to be working on site would have to bring a performing art or some sort of musical talent with them, and also have an interest in sports as well. But back then it wasn't sort of, sponsored by FIFA or Nike or whatever. It was all sort of grassroots stuff. So what do you have as... So we're jumping forward the slides just a bit quicker. Whoever's in charge of the thing, come back one. Bring it in. Bring it back a slide. Nope. Okay, well, whoever's in charge of the slides, I'll wait for you to bring it back, but I'll talk in the meantime. So he had people with learning disabilities who were there, including people with Down syndrome, and what he did realise was that, thank you, no, we're going forward too quick. Where is this coming from? I'll do it myself manually. Okay, so John Langan Down realised that people who were engaging in sport were naturally living longer. Like Dr. Bhavani was saying, and the previous speaker as well, if you keep fit, then there's the old expression, you don't see many old fat people. It's going to be the same people with Down syndrome as well. But when you're doing sports, you also start using your brain as well. So the whole package starts to work well. So that leads to one word in particular, which is development. So there's various strands of development which you're going to get through sport. Health is the obvious one. And going through the points I've got up here, energy release. Now, we've all been angry before. I sit at a table most days just tapping away on a computer. And after about 4 hours, I get absolutely whack tired. And you wouldn't think you could get tired just by sitting in front of a computer, but I'm sure that anyone who works in an office can probably have some empathy with that. So what I do is during the day, I'll go for maybe a 3 or 5 kilometre run. It's not long, but enough for me to release the energy. I come back refreshed. You wouldn't think so. Use energy, come back more refreshed. It does actually work. Your body gets rid of a lot of the venom inside it, and that's it. Whether you have Down syndrome or you don't, it's a good model to be looking at. So improves concentration. Now, there's a twin-edged sword to this. When you're doing the exercise, your body's going to work better, obviously, as your brain does. But I remember a particular family that I was working with back in the days of my time at the Down Syndrome Association. Worth me mentioning, I should have mentioned it before, for 10 years I worked at the Down Syndrome Association in the UK. I no longer work there. But during that time, I set up a sports scheme, which certainly for the last 8 years I was there was going strong, and I believe still is now. And I'm still in contact with most of the football clubs that I brokered teams with there, people with Down syndrome. But there was one particular family at Fulham Football Club, and one particular child called Joe. And he was a real terror. He was a runner. You left him for 2 seconds and he was out of here. Now, his mother on a Friday used to bribe him and say, if you don't behave, you're not going to your football training. Well, that improved his concentration, certainly. His parents got called up by the school about 3 weeks later and said, we don't know what it is with Joe, but on a Friday, he's incredible. He pays attention, he does all his work, he dresses really well. What can you say about that? Well, he has football training at 5 o'clock at Fulham Football Club. So it improves concentration in a number of ways. Sleep apnea was mentioned before as well. You exercise, if you go to bed tired, it's the best feeling, it really is. Exercise, eat well, go to sleep. Don't exercise, go to sleep grumpy, eat a load of rubbish, not so good, definitely not. Maintain a healthy weight. When you exercise, you're trying to get the athlete's mindset in there. There's no point of going on a football field or playing cricket or tennis or judo, wherever it is you like, doing 1 or 2 hours of workout, and then afterwards coming off the pitch and saying, right, give me my chocolate and my can of full-fat Coca-Cola. It kind of defeats the purpose, and again, counteracts your body keeping itself fit and healthy. So your child comes off from the football pitch, give them a bottle of water and an apple. They might not like it at first, but if you tell them it's the Wayne Rooney or David Beckham diet, they'll soon get together. Okay, socially, making new friends. I'm going to tie points 1 and 3 together in terms of making new friends. Now, rather than just sitting at home watching DVDs, putting on the weight, that whole sort of business, you come out, you start meeting new groups. Now, your children will meet new people. They might make new friends, they might not. It's their choice. Depends on how well they're going to interact with people. But the other good thing as well is parents got the opportunity to meet other parents. Talk about your children. Not talk about them, it's up to you. But you start with new social circles. You then have the opportunity, should you wish, to have a bit of a break, a bit of respite if you look at it that way. Again, from my experience, most parents will want to actually watch the sessions, see how their children are performing, see how they're developing, etc. But again, you've got the opportunity there. Interpersonal skills. You only develop interpersonal skills by interacting with people. With or without Down syndrome, you are only going to improve and sharpen those tools by meeting other people. Bottom line, anyone tells me different, rubbish. So, and self-confidence comes to that as well. It's like this morning when I stood up and I did the first speech. I'll be honest, I was pretty nervous. I'm doing all right now, but probably because I'm a bit tired from lunch. But if I was to do this every day, 3 times a day, I guarantee I'd probably come up here, both my feet tied together, looking like a clown, and I wouldn't care less what everyone's thinking about me. So the self-confidence comes. If the first time you go into a pitch or you pick up a tennis racket and everyone's looking at you, you're thinking, uh-oh, I don't like this. After a while, you start to improve. After a while, everyone else is just going to be invisible around you. It's going to get there, you're going to do your thing, you're going to concentrate on the game, you've got your team around you, whether you're in goal, a defender, whatever position you're playing, and that's it. And you pick up the team dynamics as well. Again, it's a new skill to be doing. Which leads me on to nice to be a part of something. So the gentleman this morning, Dr. He's going to shoot me, the man from America, did a fantastic speech on siblings. Now, siblings, a person with Down syndrome is going to see their siblings growing up, and they're going to see them, whether it be getting married, driving, etc. They're also going to see them going to school, coming back with certificates, medals, etc. We all have a certificate, we all have a medal, we all have a trophy. Now, is there anything saying that a person with Down syndrome can't get any of those? I don't think so. I really don't think so. There's opportunity to do those. There's one other developmental strand that I haven't put in there, and that's technical. You'll develop a technical ability to whichever sport you decide to go. Every sporting discipline comes with a way to improve a certain skill set, whether it's kicking the ball, eye-to-hand coordination, whichever sport you decide to do. And a thing as well, in India, cricket, massive thing. Okay, you'll be surprised I was. Got a few examples here of how I was. So I used to have a guy called Vinay who used to work for me, and now is a good friend of mine. I first started working with him. He wanted to do a couple of things. I said, tell me about a few things you'd like to develop in. He said, email, learning how to use digital camera, and what else was it? Oh yeah, he got very nervous with presentations. He must have taken it after me. He mastered the whole lot. That was no problem. But I did notice that he used to come in with his snacks. He used to like stopping at the supermarket before coming into work. And he always used to have a McDonald's bag with him. And his mum never knew about that. She used to give him the money to go down to the health shop and get some snacks, some nuts and whatever else. So I used to sort of joke around with him. So I'm going to call your mum up. I'm going to tell you got a McDonald's. Oh, no, don't do that. I said, what about doing some exercise? And he laughed at me. He laughed at me like, how can I describe it? He laughed at me like a big fat accountant would do with their arms outside a Jaguar and a cigar in their mouth, blowing smoke in my face and then driving off. That's the way he did it. And then one day, he got influenced by someone. Someone said, do you want to come to the gym with me? I was like, I'll see what it's about. So he went to the gym, typical Vinay. He went there with a smart shirt like this and a pair of tracksuit bottoms. He was half in, half out. That kind of almost expressed his mindset. Well, that was about 6 years ago. He dropped about 2 stone in weight. He goes 6 times a week at the moment on his own, made new friends, and he puts me to shame by a long way. So here's a nice little story here. How am I doing on time, by the way?
You've got about 4 minutes left.
Fantastic. 4's all I need. In 2006, when I'd mentioned that we're going to start doing a scheme for football for people with Down syndrome, I remember speaking to one of the families, and I remember speaking to one of the kids who was about 10 years old, and I said, how far would you like to get with your football? And this kid said, I want to play at Manchester United on a Saturday, like David Beckham does. I went, you know what, give it a go. I said, I can't guarantee you it, but I said, give it a go. And the dad looked at me like, I knew that the second the child turned away, that was it, he was in my ear. Why are you going to say things like, you're giving him false hope, he's not going to play, he's not David Beckham. Oh, hold a minute. I said, you're not David Beckham. I said, neither am I. I said, I'm never going to play at Manchester United. I said, it's about trying to get to a goal. For anybody, a goal's going to come to you 50%, and you've got to go the other 50%, try and get in there. Everyone's goals are different, but it's about trying to get on that journey. Well, we went a bit further, because one day I got a phone call from Manchester United Football Club, and they said, at half-time, would you like to bring 2 football teams. We've got one from three guys from Manchester United, 3 guys from Tottenham Football Club in London. Bring them up at half-time, they can play a match. Well, the kid played in front of 75,000 people at Old Trafford at Manchester United. So I had great pleasure of turning around to the father and saying, "I told you so." He laughed. He was very, 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 very happy to be proved wrong. And since then, there's been a number of children that have gone onto the pitches and done exactly the same throughout the UK and beyond. Some of you may have heard of Karen Gaffney, some of you may have not. I'm not sure back in your days. Incredible lady. Literally, I think she's 4'11", major hip surgery. Now, she was the first lady to swim Lake Tahoe. First lady, not first person with Down syndrome. 9-mile swim, and she did that in freezing temperatures. Since then, she swum around Alcatraz on quite a few occasions, and she has raised the bar in terms of what a person shouldn't really be able to do. I had a great idea in 2007. I ran a marathon. Yes, I'll do it. How difficult can it be? I used to run distances and come home and say, that's got to be 6 miles. So one day I thought, if I'm running this marathon, I've got to understand how many miles I've done. So I went and did this 6-mile route in my car. It turns out it was only 2 miles. So I had to do some serious training. So when I did it in 2007, a guy called Simon Beresford decided I'm going to run a marathon as well. He was 39, he's 4 years older than me. Now, we both did our marathons, and straight afterwards someone said to me, now you've done your first one, you'll never turn back. You're going to start, you're going to be doing them all the time. I said, you must be crazy. Have you any idea the pain my body is in at the moment? It wasn't for me. Simon continued. The year after, he knocked off half an hour off his marathon time. And for those of you who are wondering, so I have had this question, people say, how long was the marathon? There is only one distance on a marathon. It is 26.2 miles or 42 kilometres, whichever metric or whatever system you want to use. So my point being that between Karen doing a 9-mile swim, Simon doing a 26.2-mile run, they didn't just go into that in one day. They had to train, they had to go through it. They became a product of their sporting environment. They put in the training, they became fit, they left the fat behind. They got the mindset, they became stronger physically and mentally. Close to home, Artie, is Artie here at all? She know? Okay, well, Artie should be very proud. As you got on the slide, she's 25, used to be scared of water, and now she's a championship swimmer in Special Olympics. Okay, watch this space, because I'm sure I've got about a minute left, if that now. I think the intention now within the Down Syndrome Federation of India is to start sporting schemes throughout India and start to expand them. Start to understand the training. So, for example, mentioning about the Atlanto-axial before, something to certainly that would be of relevance when starting a scheme. But there's many different things depending on the sporting discipline you're going to do. You're going to need to research, get medical advice, etc. There is a lot of information out there. But the main thing is to actually start getting your children involved with the sports and test them out. One sport doesn't fit all, certainly not. You might have to end up going for 4 or 5 different sports. The teacher might not be the right teacher, etc. But the intention is to start these schemes and start pushing it through India. Thanks for your attention. Any questions?
Fabulous. Thanks, Paul, and for that very inspirational talk and all of that information. It's really fabulous. And we do have a small gift for you.
Ah. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, please. Is it a pair of sunglasses so I can see?
Hi.
Hi.
So I have 2 sons. One is 10 and a half, and the younger one who has Down syndrome is 7 and a half. I started both of them in a football league about 3 months back. The younger one seemed to take to it in the initial few days. He doesn't seem to be enjoying himself anymore. He's not playing with the team, so there is another part of the court where I take him. He makes great contact with the ball, so his gross motor skills seem to be really working well. But he's not wanting to play with the team. My husband's not very keen that I continue because he doesn't seem to take an interest. I want to ask you, should I just continue pursuing so that maybe he takes to it?
Is your husband here?
He's not.
Okay, well, first thing I'd say, ignore your husband.
I'm good at that.
Yeah, so the thing about the scheme that I remember setting up in the UK was this. It was purely for people with Down syndrome. So I remember at the time there was a lot of parents sort of going, okay, so you're looking to exclude people with Down syndrome from, from the rest of society. No. I remember Queen's Park Rangers Football Club at the time. They said, listen, we've seen what's happening at Fulham with their scheme there. We have a few people with Down syndrome who come to our PAN learning disability, but a lot of them come and some of them are struggling, and then they just don't come again. And maybe a few months later we get another person with Down syndrome. So they started to set up the purely Down syndrome football. Now this was 2008. They now have 4 teams that have sessions a week. Some of the people just go through the training drills, literally kicking the ball, going from A to B, and that's it. It's not about doing overhead kicks and becoming the next David Beckham. So it's not about getting in a match. It's not about, as I said before, I won't become the next David Beckham. It's about having not had a certain set of skills and developing a certain set of skills, improving the health. And if the sport of football enables that as a platform, great. It doesn't have to be about sharpening the skills to the point where the person's going to be a prolific goal scorer. Not at all.
But he's not going to the team at all. It's me that he wants to play with. So if I'm not there, he's just sitting in the corner.
But
the coaches are really accommodating, so they try to take him on one-on-one.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to be getting there. And I feel that if I give it a few more months, maybe he'll take to it.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing as well, start to introduce another person into your little group of 2. Start to make it a group of 3, and then a 4. And before you know it, you started a team. And that's it. So, slowly dilute it, and that's it. Maybe dilute it with a third person who's maybe a family member or somebody within the training there that, your son gets on with really well. It will happen. It happens. Things don't happen overnight.
One more follow-up question. Yeah. So we recently got the X-ray done for his spine, as the doctor had suggested, and everything seems to be fine. They have told me not to put him on the trampoline and not to put him in any contact sport. Would that not qualify as not putting him into football as well?
Football predominantly doesn't have somersaults and things like that involved in it. So although it's a contact sport, the chance of you rolling around on your neck are quite minimal. You've probably got as much chance of falling over your feet walking to the toilet, really.
So it's a safer option, would say?
Absolutely, yeah, as is tennis, cricket, etc. When you're dealing with things like, say, wrestling, judo, etc., certainly get all the tests done, but also, again, very, very, very slowly. It's like with anything. If I'm asthmatic and I join a running club, I'll let them know. So if I start huffing and puffing, they'll know, hey, pull him in a little bit,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Probably have time for just one more question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was really informative and helpful. So my question is that we've earlier discussed that usually individuals with Down syndrome would get fatigued easily. They get tired, as we discussed in the thyroid presentation. In sports, to what level is it okay to push them? Like my brother is motivated, if we give him incentives and other things, he's motivated to pursue the sport. After 2 miles, after a mile and a half, he is huffing and puffing and he does not want to continue anymore. Being a true sibling that I am, I would push him irrespective of seeing whether, he has special needs or not. But again, parents say, it's fine, just stop, let it be, don't push him any further. So I want to ask you, to what point is it okay to push them if they're not able to do that in that moment?
Firstly, siblings don't like getting pushed around by any other siblings. That's
that is true.
That is a heinous crime in itself. It's like listening to parents. As children, we know, never having lived life, we know better than our parents from day one, apparently. In terms of pushing anyone, it needs to be a very, very gradual process. Very, very gradual indeed. It is tempting to say, "Come on, move, stop messing about." But it's best when it comes via the trainer, and the motivation is in there. Professor Tony Holland's sitting over there. I had the pleasure of working with him and some of his crew for a long time. And remember at the time when I was at the Down Syndrome Association, one of his colleagues, a guy called Alexander Phillips, conducted a fantastic study on the effects of exercise on people with Down syndrome. And there were some fantastic revelations even that came from that study. Like, for example, the intake of oxygen being, if memory serves me, around 40% less than the general population. So adapt the games. It doesn't have to be on a full-size pitch and have 45 minutes each way. Make it 10 minutes each way, so in that way you're not huffing and puffing as much, covering as much ground. Adaptation is certainly a key word when sort of moving forward. And something I didn't say as well was, in terms of creating purely Down syndrome-specific sessions, it's not about creating this microcosm and saying, that's it, you're locked in there. If a person with Down syndrome is doing 9 miles of swimming or running 10 marathons, then there's probably a good possibility they can coexist as well in the PAN learning disability, and they can also progress to Special Olympics equivalent, etc. So always have those gateways equivalent in there. So, but from original question, push, maybe not so much from yourself, do it gently, monitor along the way.
And so should we be in touch with the medical doctor at all times, to see whether there are any biological pressures on the individual?
I think if you have any concerns, certainly along the way, absolutely. There's no harm in sort of getting checked. If it's just more of a sort of precautionary thing to say, I don't know, it's like he was limping on a certain day, you would do that anyway, wouldn't you? So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ask me any questions at tea time if you want, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh. All right, our next speaker is Simran Godwani. She's a renowned dancer who created a program that was specially for children with Down syndrome. So we'll be building again on that issue around physical activity. So Simran can join us. All right. We might just move on to the next talk. First, I think we're missing a speaker, so. Yep. So thank you. So we'll move on to Ms. Hema Malini, and she's a special educator at the Down Syndrome Federation of India, and she's going to give a presentation around mainstream schools and some curriculum adaptations for mainstream schools. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. As introduced, I don't have to again introduce myself. So many of the parents also are familiar with me, and we have so many concerns about how these children are going to be mainstreamed or how to sustain them in the schools. So in my presentation, I have given the tips or few informations of materials that can be used even before you switch on to your paper pencil methods. So let's go on to the slide. So this is called concrete learning. So concrete learning is nothing but a combination of uses of all senses. So try to stimulate all the senses of the child using materials. Just by using words or just by giving them papers and pencils, repeatedly writing may not work. But when you work with the children using material and then switching over slowly to the notebooks might work better. So I'm very glad to share with you these experiences that I had with few children using this material at a very early age of learning. So the concept formations happens better so that the child can transform it, or the transition to the paper pencil happens very easily. So I would like to play the video and then talk about it so that it will be more clear to you. That's very good. That's very good. Yeah, here in the video we saw the child working on the lazy 8. It's a brain gym exercise. It's a very abstract thing to say that the child has to move his hand from left to right to cross the midline of the body. This benefits the child in 3 ways. One is the child is moving on this board, which is sensorially tactile made. So one part of the board is a coarse texture of sandpaper. The other part of the board is made up of felt paper, which is very soft. So when the transition of the finger happens on both the material, the sensorial inputs are given to the child. The child starts understanding better what is being used. So in case of deficit vision, the tactile also increases his ability to read or ability to understand what is in the material. The second benefit is the eye-hand coordination. You would have seen that the child's eye is going along with the finger, so that is the very important thing for reading and writing. So the child is developing eye-hand coordination. And the third is very important, the left and the right brain intersections or the synapse being created because of the hand movements over there along with the eyes, so that the information can be stored as well as can be restored when required or can be used when really the child requires for his academics. So this is very important pre-academic skills to be started at a very early stage so that the child can use the skill at a later stage when the child has to read and write in the school. So these materials benefit not just the children, but the benefit is for the teacher. For the teacher to understand a child is very important. In many of the cases, when the obvious terms that are being used is the child is not behaving properly or odd behaviors can be seen in the classrooms. So, but why does this happen? The child is not getting adjusted to the environment. It could be the noise, or it could be the vision, or it could be the tactile. In this case, at a pre-primary level, the child is being given clay to use for the finger strengthening. And look at this child now, I'm playing the video.
Roll it, Lakshana, roll it.
The child is not able to take the texture of the clay. How do you expect the same finger strengthening to be happening with the clay? So the teacher has to understand the child and change the material over there. The next child.
Easy ball, squeeze the ball. Squeeze the ball, Kaushik. Kaushik, squeeze the ball. Squeeze. Squeeze this ball also, Kaushik. Squeeze this ball also. How do you squeeze this ball? Squeezy, squeezy, squeezy ball. I can squeeze the ball. Squeeze this. Squeeze the ball.
So the child has refused to even touch the coarse material. So this is what is the very important thing that the teacher should understand. What kind of material can I make to support this child to learn better? At the same time, we cannot avoid the material that the child is not willing to touch. The teacher can slowly bring in the material as a graded exposure methods. She cannot all of a sudden bring in the learning material in that texture. So this is very important. At the same time, it all depends upon the noise also. Sometimes the child is too sensitive to the noise. So bring down the noise levels or gradually train the child to adapt to the noise. This is also very important. Moving on to the next. Now this is the learning happening. The child is using a concrete material to learn the number skills. He is learning to count 10. Let us see the video here.
Wait, after keeping you should say 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Where is the 10th one? You kept.
So the child counted 10 with the ice cream sticks. We have specifically made the ice cream sticks to be colored so that an additional input is given for storing in the memory. Now the child's counted is 10, but in the later stage he may have to use this in a different forms. So we have given an additional color input so that the brain can store that he is counted 10 along with the red color sticks. If I probably put a bundle of red color ice cream sticks and ask him, how many sticks are there in this? The cardinal number 10 has to come. He shouldn't again say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is what is expected in the school. So the child has to say 10. So the teacher has ensured here that he has counted 10, and then let us see how this will be used in the next part of his learning. So this is the critical thinking. Now he knows that he can count 10. We are moving on beyond 10. This child has to now learn the number skills beyond 10. That means 2 digits. The place values are very important, and also to understand that by every digit, the number increases. The value of the number increases. So let us see the video here.
Keep 1 tens. 1 tens and 3 ones. 1, 2, 3. Third.
So it was very self-explanatory that the child has used the learned concept of number 10 in the place value to say the place value of 1 was tens and then the 3 ones continued. So the 2 concepts could be easily taught using one particular material. So yeah, this is again the critical thinking of using appropriate words to make a sentence. The child would have learned using flashcards or personal books the naming words or the action words along with the sight words. Now we have to see how this child is going to use these words, which is already stored information, into sentences so that the school evaluatory system of Phillips or pairing or what we call as matching can be done by this child. Let's see the video and then talk about it.
Smell. Very good. Let us remove the smell. Now read. What is this? Very good. Mouth. Very good. Let us change the eat. Now read it. No, this is C. Okay. Good. Very good.
So the child could easily see when I flipped the card, he could easily tell he could easily read through the sentence and got the last answer properly. So when the Phillips was saying, we can see with our dash. So the child will be able to fill it up because he has learned it using the materials so well that even if a card is flipped, he knows what is the next and what will be the end result of it. So even in the pairing, eyes for seeing, mouth for eating, and nose for smelling. This kind of relatively learning happens when the materials are used rather than just learning on the paper and pencil. So the child will be able to do both the evaluative systems by this method. This is a compatible visual aids, but I suggest that this cannot be, a digital visual aid can be given for helping the child with low vision, but it should not be used as the only source of learning. If the child has learned through flashcards and the whole word approach, then to read a spelling, probably we can use a digital mode. Because if I start with the digital mode, the child may not accommodate himself to learn from a book. That it becomes a very difficult process because in a school we cannot have a digital board all the time supported for the child. This is just a television set which can be used at home. You need not get a digital board at home. Just create digital flashcards instead of just a printed flashcard so that you can use it there. Now this child is learning the spellings. Just see the video here.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. What is it?
So the child knows the name of the word as such and is only learning the spellings. So to speed up the learning, I can use the digital board, which you can any parent can be using at home. In schools, they can use as a smart screen. So enhancing attention span and learning, usually there's an issue that the children do not stay back to complete their work or they miss out on formations of the letters, so they write reversals or they might even leave the work in half and move away. So these concerns can be kept in mind so that users of certain particular material can enhance their attention span as well as the memory. Here we'll see the video here where the child is finger tracing on the alphabets.
Sure.
So this finger tracing is again done on the sandpaper alphabet so that more retention can be done. The storage of the information is available for the child so that he can retrieve it and reuse it when needed. So in the next slide, we will see this child writing the same word.
What is this?
So it was relatively easy for him because he has already done it tactile over there, not just seeing or repeatedly writing. He has done it tactile, so it was easy for him to write back when he is needed. And we can use their very loving toys or more possessive balls, purses. These children tend to have all these possessive things with them and they don't like to live with them at all. Even while going to school, sometimes they even carry it in their bags. So allow them to use those toys but use it as a resource. So now I have made this child who the parent came to me and said the child knows to count but she wouldn't do it. So this is very common concern. They know it but they won't do it because lack of motivation. Now how to make them motivate or how to motivate them to do the same work which they already know. So here in the video I have made this child to work with a glow puppet which she really likes to always have in her hand. So instead of saying, you count and match, I said, make your pinky doll count and match. Now this child is working with that.
match with 6. Match, match. That's
So the sources, there is sources and the sources can be blended this way. So this is how we can use the material in many other ways so that the child feels comfortable, the teacher's comforts can be maintained, and the parents need not become ringmasters. The parents can leave the child with the material, the child will work by itself. That is more important. The child has to work by himself to learn so that it can be reproduced in the classrooms.
So we're going to need to just wrap up shortly. Thank you.
And that's a thank you from me.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you so much for those excellent examples, and don't run away yet. We might have some questions for you. Are there any questions? I'm slightly blind. The lights. I think we've got one over there.
Yeah.
What age should we start this? Because my kid is just 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
She's going through a particular phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
What age? Because bracing and all for a 2-year child,
Yeah.
would it be too early? Of course, we would try to introduce it. But
Yeah.
wouldn't it be too early? I don't know. I was just...
Yeah, the first slide was lazy 8, the brain gym exercise.
yeah.
It has to be started at earliest. So 1.5 years itself we can start that.
Okay.
And give as many tactiles as you can. See, at home you will be singing small songs or rhymes. Use material when you're doing this. So the tactile improves their retention. That's what I say. The child will be learning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Yes.
when you're singing a song of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or any other song like that. But use materials along with it.
Sure.
That's more important.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
how do you increase, like, not how,
Sorry.
what is the method that you apply to enhance their cognitive, because Dhriti will do it for some time and then she will just throw it away and then she'll move on to something else. But she knows everything, she will do it. On a given day, you just ask her, Dhriti, do this, spell this, she'll spell it. But when you sit down with her, okay, you have to do this, she will not do it. So is there any method in which we can reproduce it when it is needed actually?
Yeah, that was the last slide I spoke about the motivation. The child would have learnt it, the child knows how to do it, but the child would have lacked motivation. So now think of her interest. Understand Riti's interest or understand what gives a pleasure to Riti and then place her in that place or place her with that toy and then make her do it. Once or twice, then she'll get used to it even without. But you have to take turns. Like if once she's doing with a toy, the next time you'll say, now it's my turn or next it is your turn. So probably that will work. See, these are all the techniques which comes on hand day by day for me also. Actually, I learn on everyday basis. Anything else, please? Yeah?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And we have just a small gift for you.
Yes, thanks.